Hey everyone, welcome to our Week 8 Sunday slate here at the Outsiders Fantasy Podcast. We're going to do things a little bit different this week, see how it goes, and maybe adopt that going on or going forward on our schedule. We are, as the description said, we're going to go over the most fantasy relevant football games that are going on today. So we're going to hit a couple of those, as well as I'm going to give you guys the top 5 matchups for wide receivers and corners, as well as tight ends against linebackers and safeties. We're going to give you a quick injury report of some of the top talent in the NFL that you may have on your team. And then we'll finish it all off with our projections of top players in their positions. That's not necessarily the same as what the matchups are going to be. Some players are just ballers regardless of their matchups. That's why I'm going to give you a little bit of both just in case you got some space either from injuries or bye weeks for somebody that you might think is under the radar or something like that. So most of them will match up with the top player positions, but there'll be a one or two that probably won't be on the list. So anyway, so we'll get started. We'll go ahead and kick it off with the injury report. Just like 10 or 15 people that might be either doubtful, questionable, or out for sure for this week.
All right. So as far as the injury report goes, Mark Ingram is doubtful today. Joe Mixon is out again. Austin Hooper will be out again. Philip Lindsay is questionable with concussion. Aaron Jones is out. Gardner Minshew is questionable. Sammy Watkins is out. Tyler Higbee is questionable with a hand injury. Dalvin Cook is questionable with a groin injury. But as far as I know, he will be active. Marquez Callaway's out. Michael Thomas is out. Deebo Samuel is out. Carlos Hyde is doubtful with a hamstring injury. And Chris Carson is a game-time decision.
Okay. So the Seattle backfield is going to be a little bit hard to nail down since they're both kind of one's doubtful, one's game time. So if you have no choice, I'd probably leave. Chris Carson seems a little bit more. How do I put it? It seems a little bit more likely than a doubtful, in my opinion. So, but that's not until later on in the day. So you can kind of monitor it. Just fill in the top parts of your roster as if they weren't playing. Carlos Hyde or Chris Carson aren't playing. Leave your flex open. So when it gets closer to the game and you find something out, you can plug whoever in or make it or take them out or whatever. So we're gonna get started. So we got 4 games this week that are going to be extremely fantasy relevant. Titans, Bengals, Steelers, Ravens. Then we got Dallas and Philly, and then the Seahawks against the 49ers. 3 of them for the offensive slugfest, or not slugfest, but the offensive explosions that these teams should have. And Baltimore and Steelers, there's a lot of people that have both Steelers and Baltimore players. So just kind of give you an idea of what they're going to be going up against as far as this big battle of the defenses. So if you do have to start these players, kind of give you an idea of which ones to start if you absolutely have to. So that's the reason for that one. But we're going to kick it off with the Titans versus the Bengals. So the Bengals passing offense, we'll go ahead and start off with that. Joe Burrow in week 7, he definitely he kind of stumbled the week before, the game before, but he's definitely found his rhythm back again. He had 406 yards passing last week with 3 touchdowns and only 1 interception for a passer rating of 112.5. That's phenomenal. He's definitely making him and oh my gosh, I just forgot his name. Justin Herbert. They are both making their way towards that offensive rookie of the year trophy. So they're doing fantastic. AJ Green is
Burrow,
actually. Go ahead.
real quick. Burrow needs one more 300-yard passing game to tie the rookie record for passing game, 300-yard passing games, and he's only played 7 games so far. So,
And I'm sure Herbert's not too far behind that. That might be a race right there in itself. AJ Green owners, I do have some good news. I know the beginning of the year was kind of disappointing for you guys, but just to let you know that the past 2 weeks, he's had 7 or more receptions the past 2 weeks, and at least double-digit targets as well. So it looks like Joe Burrow. Now, granted, Tyler Boyd is still the number one receiver in Burrow's eyes, but it does show that he's getting more comfortable with AJ Green. Last week he had 13 targets, 7 receptions. So the fact that he 13 targets is really saying a lot. If he could just get a little bit more of those targets caught, he'd be getting a lot more points. But he did have 7 receptions on the 13 targets for 82 yards. But like I said, definitely the one that he's connecting the most with is Tyler Boyd. Last week he had 13 targets as well. Tyler Boyd also had 11 receptions instead for 101 yards and a touchdown. The Titans, they have struggled against the pass this entire year, especially on 3rd down, which has been absolutely frustrating personally as a fan. But last week was actually their best game defensively against the pass. And that's not – it depends on which part of the game you watch. It could be not saying a lot, or it could be saying a whole lot as far as how we make adjustments. I know in the first half they absolutely killed us. But in the second half we did tighten down. But like I said, they're coming off total, if you look at the game as a whole, their best passing defensive game so far. So we held Pittsburgh to 268 yards passing. Ben Roethlisberger had 2 touchdowns, but we got him for 3 interceptions and held him to a 67.4 QB per passer rating. I'm sorry. Where probably the key point of the game will be is the rush defense of the Titans. So far in 2020, they're 19th in the NFL, so about middle of the pack, allowing 4.9 yards per carry with 129 yards per game allowed. Overall, Joe Burrow, well, just not overall. Joe Burrow did have a rushing touchdown with 34 yards on 6 carries last week. And then overall, for 2020, the team averages 3.7 yards per carry and 98.9 yards per game, which is ranked 26th in the NFL. So the reason why this is a key point, and on top of that, as Drew mentioned, Joe Mixon is out. But also there are key offensive linemen that are out as well this week. So that's where I think the key is going to be for the game is the Titans completely just stopping the run. And since they're coming off a high point of their passing defense last week, feeling those interceptions and everything, hopefully they're able to tighten down on Joe Burrow. Can't be biased about this, but I am a Titans fan. But they could tighten down on Joe Burrow because of that. If they can stuff the run, get up on them early, it'll turn into a Joe Burrow type of game, which is not necessarily a bad thing if you're a Joe Burrow owner. Even if they do tighten the clamps down on him by shutting down the rushing offense, he's still going to, as we know, Joe Burrow can attempt as many passes in the game as they want him to. So sky's the limit on that one. And then as far as the Titans are concerned with their rushing, Derrick Henry, a stat that a lot of owners don't like to hear, don't give up on him. Derrick Henry, he's been held to under 4 yards per carry for the past 6 games this year. But he's facing a defense that ranks 28th against the run with Cincinnati. So I would expect that to increase. And the Titans so far are undefeated when Derrick Henry rushes for in I think they're 16-0 when Derrick Henry rushes for 100 yards or more. So I think that is going to also be one of the strong points, just the running game in general in this game. But as far as passing is concerned, the Bengals defense also struggles against the pass. In week 7, they did allow 5 touchdown passes from Baker Mayfield, who didn't have Odell Beckham Jr., as we know. While Tannehill on the year has 15 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. And him and A.J. Green can definitely get the job done, as well as John, who has shown that he can contribute as well. Just waiting for Corey Davis to get those touchdowns up there. He's definitely getting targets. He's getting thrown to. It's just either it's a drop or something, or a penalty gets called or something like that. But don't give up on Corey Davis either. So this is going to be a good game for the entire Titans offense, in my opinion. So as well as the Bengals offense as well, as far as their receivers, Tyler Boyd, A.J. Green, and definitely Joe Burrow is going to have a lot of attempts. So. And then next we're going to go to the Steelers and Ravens. Like I said, the reason that we're going over this is because these are both tough defenses, but also both of these teams, people have a lot of stock in, whether it be Hollywood Brown, whether it be J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, or Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, Ben Roethlisberger, all of the Pittsburgh receivers, John Connor, Terminator, James Conner, sorry about that, Eric Ebron, so on and so forth. Also the defenses as well, I'm sure it's highly owned out there. Obviously you're going to have to start some of these players because you drafted them in key, like high positions to where they are your starters. So just kind of give you a little bit of preview of what you might be in for this week. So number one of the most important things about this game is Baltimore is coming off a bye week. So number one, they're rested, they're fresh. Number two, they've had 2 weeks to prepare for Pittsburgh, and they saw Ben Roethlisberger's 3 interceptions against the Titans last week.
The 3 interceptions, I don't think it's anything to be alarmed about with Big Ben, personally. 2 of those were tipped, and the defense just made great plays to come up with the ball. So, I mean, yeah, they still go down as 3 interceptions, but I don't think it's anything to be alarmed about, personally, anyways.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the past, though, he is kind of a gunslinger, so he will take chances. As we saw, as he's falling down, being sacked, he'll just turn around and pitch it backwards to somebody, hoping or something like that. So Pittsburgh, they did show last week that they can win ugly games, even though, like we've said several times, they didn't pass for over 300 yards. It was under 300 yards. And the passer rating itself was pretty low. They showed that they can definitely lean on James Conner. Last week, speaking of James Conner, Pittsburgh finished with 4 yards per carry as a team rushing, where James Conner finished a little bit higher, 4.1 yards per carry. He had 20 rushes for 82 yards. Which is pretty good. Titans' rush defense is pretty decent, pretty solid. So it showed that they can rely on him. So even though the game might not be going their way passing wise, as long as they can keep it close, they will not abandon the run for James Conner owners. While it may seem like Pittsburgh isn't all juggernaut team, just in general, because they're 5-0 and all that stuff. Keep in mind, they are actually they rank 23rd in the NFL in total offensive yards with 358 total yards per game. So we see a lot of that as being because their defense is just so lights out. It allows them to still win games despite having such a small amount of yardage compared to other teams in the NFL. However, the weakness in Baltimore's defense is against the run, in which we just said Pittsburgh does like to run the ball in close games and keep it gritty and keep it dirty and just as ugly as possible, if that's what it means, because they do have a defense that can win.
Like we always say, the good quarterbacks like Lamar and Mahomes, and they can't beat you from the sideline. So get that running game going and keep them over there on the sideline. Keep that clock moving.
Exactly.
Take possessions away.
Yeah. But just to put a stat to the comment that we made, against the run this year, they're allowing 4.6 yards per carry and 109 yards per game. So expect a lot of James Conner, like we said. Where Baltimore does dominate is against the pass. They do have the 11th best pass defense, allowing a passer rating of 89.7 per quarterback per game. And then only 6.7 yards per attempt. They're also tied for 5th in the NFL with sacks, in sacks with 22. And like we always say, they're still first in the NFL in blitzing percentage with 46% of the time they're blitzing. So a lot of those sacks are coming from the blitz. And also, they're going to use it as much as possible. The good thing, though, on a side note, Big Ben is someone who has played Baltimore. He's played John Harbaugh a lot of times over his career. They play each other twice a year, at least every year. So I don't see these blitzes necessarily hurting Ben. If anything, that might be to his advantage, getting hot routes out and stuff like that. The only thing is it could lead to some sacks. But thankfully for Pittsburgh, they are tied for second. So almost the tops in the NFL in sacks allowed, with only 8 so far this year. So the fact that they do see Baltimore a lot, this blitzing 46% of the time, we might actually see that a little bit lower in this game than on their season average, because they definitely don't want to get caught with their pants down trying to do a blitz, and then they pick up the blitz, and then it exposes the weakness in the defense where the blitz came from. So.
Yeah, Big Ben, he likes to get the ball up. He likes to get the ball out quickly, anyways, which helps with those 8 sacks. Yeah. Only be on that.
Exactly. And on the flip side, Baltimore's offense is going to be playing a very talented Pittsburgh defense as well. Now, granted, their pass defense, as far as their secondary and linebackers against the pass, isn't as high as Baltimore's. But as far as sacks and blitz percentage, they're way up there with Baltimore as well. They're first in sacks with 26 in the NFL, and they're second in blitz percentage at 42.7% of the time. Where that is different with Baltimore is they're 15th. They're 19th in the NFL with sacks. They've allowed 15 sacks so far this year. So that is where it is going to get a little bit messy for Baltimore, I believe, in that. So even though Lamar Jackson did have a phenomenal rushing game last week, he also threw for some scores as well. For some points as well. I definitely see him being under a lot of duress, but just because of his usage and the way he can escape and catch defenses kind of slacking a little bit, I don't think it's going to necessarily affect his rating a whole lot. And it's definitely not going to be as high as it could be. He might seem a little bit more human in this game, but he's definitely going to get his, in my opinion, like he always does. So, another place in this battle of the defenses is where Pittsburgh they rank second against the run, with allowing 3.4 yards per carry and only 69 yards per game. Whereas Baltimore, on the flip side, is the NFL's #1 rushing defense. They have 164 yards per game on average and 5.4 yards per carry. So even as Drew mentioned earlier, with Mark Ingram being doubtful, They still have two other running backs that can fill in really well that they're obviously producing with regardless. Obviously, they would love to have Mark Ingram, but they can definitely make do with Lamar Jackson and company, and make it difficult for just about anybody. So that's going to be an interesting thing to watch.
Dobbins is a guy liking that game too as well.
Yeah, I definitely like Dobbins as well. All right, and then on to the Seahawks and 49ers game. This is, again, it's a battle of explosive offenses against defenses that struggle in certain areas. So Russell Wilson in Week 6, believe it or not, had his worst game passing of the year. He only threw for 388 yards. He only threw for 3 touchdowns. But all that aside, all jokes aside, he did have 3 interceptions, and that's usually not like Russ. And he had an 84 passer rating, which is low for him. So that's why we get.
I believe that's the first time all year he was under 100 passer rating.
Yeah, so that passer rating plus 3 interceptions is why we say it's the worst of the year. But if you still had Russell Wilson, he still scored a bunch of points for you. So fantasy-wise, it's nothing to be worried about. His main target last week and just all year was obviously Tyler Lockett. He had 20 targets, 15 receptions for 200 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So all 3 of Russ's touchdowns were caught by Tyler Lockett. Just to show, he's also – I know DK has over 500 yards receiving, but to put it in perspective, DK is more of a big play guy, believe it or not, even though he's way bigger than Tyler Lockett. Tyler has 45 receptions on the year to DK's 24 receptions on the year. And as we always say, targets are the main key in deciding number one matchups, but also targets are the key in deciding who should be on your starting roster. So if you have both for some reason, and you have to pick one, I would definitely go with Lockett. But in this game in particular, I'd probably start both of them. I don't know why you'd have both of them, but I brought it up, so I had to finish the the thought process. So, also something that Russ hasn't done a lot this year, as far as to this capacity, even though he's capable of. He showed off his running skills. He only had 6 rushes, but it was for 84 yards for 14 yards per carry. So he's showing off Lamar Jackson type skills. So he's showing that. Yeah, what's up?
Oh, I was saying which could be key in this game with Carson and both banged up. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, like we said, Carlos Hyde. As of last week, he picked up where Chris Carson left off. He finished with 15 rushes for 68 yards for 4.5 yards per carry, and he did have a touchdown. So a decent game. Not like Chris Carson numbers, but he was definitely a decent plug-in. But we don't know which one's starting or if either one is starting. But if you're a Russell Wilson owner, I would definitely be chomping at the bit to see what he does today, because this might be a little bit more of a mobile day for him. The San Francisco pass defense did have a great game last week, but just keep in mind it was against a Pats team that has been doing really bad in the passing game, and Cam Newton, who's been really struggling lately. They did, but even it is the NFL. It is professional football. So to hold someone like Cam Newton to 98 yards and 3 interceptions is still saying something, even though the offense isn't really good in general. And in 2020, they're only allowing a 78.5 passer rating, which is 4th best in the NFL, 203 passing yards per game. But again, I don't expect those numbers to be a reflection of today's game. even though that does say something about their pass defense. But Russ is just really good, and so is that receiver core. So possibly where San Francisco has the advantage is against the Seahawks defense, believe it or not. They still haven't found a way to make it click. They did get another pass rusher in a trade, I believe. Still waiting for Jamal Adams to show up. But once it all clicks in Bobby Wagner, they should be dangerous. But as of right now, their defense still remains a weak spot to their team. And where like I said, where San Francisco has the advantage is in the rushing game. Last week they rushed 37 times for 197 yards for 5.3 yards per carry and 4 touchdowns. Where that's significant is Jeff Wilson Jr. He contributed to that with 17 rushes, 112 yards, 6.6 yards per carry, and 3 of those touchdowns. So that tells me that not only do they have one player that can be explosive as a running back, but they also run the ball with other exciting running backs that can get the job done against defenses that are more susceptible to the run. Last week, the Seattle rush defense faced a team that has a more singular running back setup going on with the guy I can't even think of his name. I'm sorry, my memory's gone. But Kenyon Drake's backup. His backup though, not Kenyon Drake. Hold on 1 second.
Chase Edmonds.
Yeah, Chase Edmonds. I have him on my team, and I can't even remember his name. I'm an idiot. I'm sorry. But yeah, Chase Edmonds, who is a very good running back. I think he could be a starter on a lot of teams in the NFL. He just so happens to be a backup. So that's not saying that he is a scrub that faced a terrible defense last week. He actually had 33 rushes himself for 159 yards, 4.8 yards per carry, and a touchdown on Seattle. So the fact that one running back in that many rushing attempts can have 159 yards with a 4.8 yards per carry, to be able to play a team that has multiple running backs with that type of skill, and they can swap those dudes in and out so they don't get as tired as a Cardinals team that relies mostly on one running back who obviously gets fatigued towards the end of the game. I think that's a very good matchup for the San Francisco running backs. And then last week, while Kyler Murray also threw for 360 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception, that definitely shows that Seattle obviously has an issue against the pass as well. And Jimmy G desperately needs that, and so do his owners. He has the opportunity this week to get into rhythm again because last week he did struggle. He was 20 for 25, so the completion percentage was nice, and he did throw for 277 yards, but he had 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions for a 79.5 passer rating. So he's still struggling a little bit. But as good as Seattle is, though, unfortunately, this is the team to kind of get right against and improve in your run as well. So, Drew, do you want to do the Dallas game?
Not really. I'm just kidding. The battle of the NFC least for the top of the NFC least.
There you
go. Carson Wentz actually had a pretty decent game last week with 359 yards, 2 touchdowns, interception, a 91.1 rating. That's the first time he's been over 90 all year as far as passer rating goes. Travis Fulgham continued to be his top target. He had 11 targets, 5 receptions, 73 yards. I would like to see those catches go up a little bit with that amount of targets, but he has led the Eagles in 3 straight games and targets. Another guy that stepped in pretty good while both their main tight ends are hurt was Richard Rodgers with 6 catches and 85 yards. And the good news for the Eagles, the Cowboys' passing defense is allowing a 106.7 rating for the year. That's 26th in the league. And they allowed 16 touchdowns, which is 28th in the league. Philly has allowed 28 sacks, which is ranks 31st, so second worst in the league. Something Dallas really needs to take advantage of, but they did get rid of 2 defensive linemen this week, so we'll see how that helps out. I'm not really sure.
They got a plan.
Maybe they should just try playing both ways. I don't know. Like, it can't get any worse. So, but no. On the other side, the Philly pass rush has 24 sacks, which is third in the league, and 75 pressures. Cowboys allowed 6 sacks last week and 8 quarterback hits, and they got a rookie from James Madison starting today. So, with a very beat up line, so not looking good at all offensively for the Cowboys. Zeke only had 12 carries, 45 yards, and 3.8 yards per carry last week, which is very un-Cowboy-like, honestly. They usually try to get him at least 20 targets or 20, get the ball in his hands at least 20 times altogether, if not more. I do think they might try to give him more carries this week, maybe the 20 to 25 range, with the Eagles allowing 4.5 yards a carry, 136 yards per game, which is ranked 26th in the league. The Eagles' pass defense is allowing a 102 rating, which is 25th in the league, and almost a 70% completion percentage. But I don't think that will really come into play because of their pass rush and Dallas's beat-up offensive line right now. So that's about all I have for that game. There's not a whole lot to talk about in that game. There is some fantasy-relevant players.
Yeah, for sure. They're all in the Eagles.
Yeah.
Boston Scott.
There's some players on Dallas that used to be fantasy-relevant till that got hurt. So.
Well, I mean, we'll see. Never seen this quarterback play in my life, but Amari Cooper is the second best wide receiver, I believe, right now in the NFL. I guess from what Dak did, though.
Yeah.
But you never know. But yeah, the players on the Eagles that I would definitely be looking for is Fulgham, Richard Rodgers, their tight end, as well as Boston Scott. He's going to be going again because Miles Sanders, the Eagles are playing him a little bit more conservative. They're going to give him this week off. They have a bye week next week, and then he'll play again the following week after that. So we get one more week of Boston Scott, who did very well for us while Miles Sanders has been out. And, of course, Carson Wentz is going to definitely have some relevancy. So – we got a question from Tyler. So, Hilaire to take a backseat to Lev Bell this week, just because it's a personal game with the Jets. Me personally, I do not see. Yes, I see them trying to break Le'Veon Bell in more to their offensive scheme and their pace and how they play, because Lev Bell is definitely one of those running backs that doesn't hit the hole. He sits and waits for the hole to come to him, and then he hits it after that. So he has a little bit different timing that he's got to set up with his offensive lineman than Clyde Edwards does. Yeah, I do think he's going to get a little bit more touches. He's going to get obviously he can play in the passing game as well. But they didn't take him into their roster to replace Hilaire. I mean, they drafted Hilaire for a reason. And he's number 2 rushing in the NFL behind Derrick Henry, which is saying a whole lot. And he's not that far behind either. I think he's like at least 550 or something like that on the year so far, and Derrick Henry's at like 633 last I looked. So while I do see him, Lev, eating into Clyde Edwards a little bit more than he did last week, I don't think you really have anything to worry about. The only thing I could see happening is just because the Jets' defense is so garbage, Lev Bell could get like a long run or a long touchdown catch and run or something like on a screen pass or whatever, or leak out and no one be there for him. But other than that, as far as volume wise, which is what the most important thing is here, because we can't bet on big plays. We can't do that. It's almost impossible to. But what we can bet on is volume, and the volume is what's most important in everything. So, follow-up question: What about him? What about Clyde Edwards not playing in general? Um, well, if that's the case now, so there are a couple of wide receivers that I'll be going over here in a little bit that are on my top matchup list, like Demarcus Robinson and Mecole Hardman. They have two of the top five cornerback matchups on my list this week. So I mean, if it's going to go crazy. It's probably going to be through the passing game just because they're so dynamic in that area. But I think that's a stretch. That's still a stretch in my opinion. It's because it's week 8, so they haven't cinched anything up yet. They need still as many wins as anyone else in the league. You don't see Pittsburgh sitting John Connor just because the Ravens defense is so hard and he could possibly get hurt during the game or something just because they blitz a lot and they're just a hard-nosed defense. I mean, every team still needs wins, so you're going to go with the person that got you there, or dance with the one that you brought, so they say. So while I do see maybe in the fourth quarter, if they're up by a couple of touchdowns or something like that, then Lev might take more over. But I see Clyde Edwards dominating the amount of touches and volume in the first half. And even if they're up by halftime, I still see them sticking to their guns at least halfway through the third quarter, possibly the entire third. And then in the fourth, depending on how much they're up and how much the Jets have been driving on them, then you could start seeing Lev kind of come in and finishing the job. But that's not to say that if they get on the goal line, I don't doubt that they'd give it to Lev just as like a personal thing or something like that. Obviously, that kind of talk goes on to coaches and players and stuff like that. Like, hey, let me get back at him, whatever. So it's possible that Lev could steal a touchdown or 2 touchdowns or whatever, depending on the situation, how close they are to the goal line. Again, ripping off big plays, stuff like that. But as far as overall volume, Clyde Edwards I think is going to be on top of that. What about Fournette? I think he's got Ronald Jones Jr. Ronald Jones II, to compete with. They both kind of split when Fournette's healthy anyway, and Fournette, always has the ability to go for 100. If he gets enough carries, he's a bell cow type of back. Ronald Jones is a little bit more dynamic. So the Giants, they've been actually pretty stout against the run, considering their lack of defensive talent. I mean, so honestly, if it's between Fournette and Clyde Edwards, I would definitely do Clyde Edwards because Ronald Jones is their starter. They've made that abundantly clear. And I'm actually
– he's also had, like 3 or 4 straight 100-yard games?
Yeah,
So,
since they signed Lev Bell, he's definitely kicking in the high gear. Fortunately, Tyler, I have the ability to look at your team right now on air. I mean, because I'm looking at your flex and you got AJ Green in there. I like you keeping AJ Green there. So between Fournette and Clyde Edwards, I would have to pick Clyde Edwards. I mean, you got to start your studs. Sometimes you can. Sometimes you can get lucky and outthink the system, but more often than not, if you think too hard about it and you try to be cute and outthink it, you're going to get burned. Sometimes it's about starting your studs and just trusting them.
I guess that probably has AJ Green in.
Yeah, he's got AJ in his flex. Yeah, they do definitely suck against defending the pass. So we'll see how that goes. The good thing is they're good against the run, and the Bengals are missing like 2 or 3 offensive linemen and Joe Mixon. So yeah, Mike Davis did not have a good game. That's why you always okay. So here is something to, and I know you couldn't really help it because you started Calvin Ridley as well, and I don't blame you. But if you have like just one player in the future that's playing on Thursday, always put them in your flex. If you're planning on starting those people and they play on Thursday, put them in your flex because if they don't do well, then you can move like you would be able this week to put if you wanted to Clyde Edwards. And like if let's say Mike Davis was the only one that played and you didn't have Calvin Ridley and you had AJ Green in the wide receiver spot instead of Calvin Ridley, put Mike Davis in your flex. That way you could start Clyde Edwards and Leonard Fournette. Excuse me. That way, if Mike Davis does bad, you still have the other 2 running backs to lean on.
Yeah.
Sorry.
In Davis's defense, Atlanta has one of the best run defenses in the league. So
yeah, even though they can't ever like just. I'm glad they got they did as well as they did, but for some reason they just
they can't stop the pass.
Right, they can't hold a lead for nothing. Yeah, Ridley has struggled. Ridley's one of those people. He's like DK Metcalf. He's like those guys that are just it's all or nothing. It's oh dang, Jared's up 28-3 on him. Well, take a look at my roster. I got 2 people out. My whole team's full of injuries and bye weeks, so I'm taking an L this week on purpose just because I have no other choice. But yeah, Ridley is a big play guy. It's play big or go home with him for sure. Julio is Matt Ryan's favorite. You know, they've been playing together for so long, they can be blindfolded and know where each other's going to be or where the ball is going to be at. So I figured obviously Matt Ryan's going to look to Julio more often than not. It's just Calvin's got to get open like in bigger ways, I guess. Maybe Russell Gage is not drawing the defense as much as he was in the opening of the year where Calvin Ridley was starting to make some noise and take away from Julio. But, yeah. I don't know what that was. Excuse me. But, yeah, Julio's still the man for sure. But yeah, depending on how this game goes with the Bengals, you could have AJ Green taking over Calvin Ridley for your starter in the wide receiver spot. So that's what I would look at because he has struggled more often than not, and AJ is definitely on the trend upward. He's got double digit. I don't know if you heard earlier, but he's got double digit targets in the past 2 games, and he also has 7+ receptions in the past 2 games as well. So, and he had 13 targets last week for seven catches. So he may be replacing Calvin Ridley soon, depending on how he does this week on your team. In my opinion, I mean, you could do whatever you want, but that's what I would be thinking if I were you. So, any other questions before we move on? No? Okay, cool. All right, so now we're going to break down the top 5 cornerback wide receiver matchups. Like I said, it's not going to reflect 100% exactly to the projections of the top players of this week that we have projected. But it is one of those things that if you need somebody off of waivers real quick or something like that, or you have a trade for next week, whatever. There's some players that you can pick up to fill in some holes. And then obviously the projections are going to just go over basically the studs of the NFL like it usually will reflect. So we'll start off with the wide receivers. So not in any particular order. My top matchups for the wide receivers are going to be Tyler Boyd because he's going against Chris Jackson. Cooper Kupp from the Rams. He's going against Nick Nedlin, from Miami. Mecole Hardman from Kansas City. He's going against Pierre Desel for the Jets. Demarcus Robinson for KC. He's again going against a New York Jet player, Blashawn Austin. And then I got a 4-way tie for the 5th spot. I know that's kind of copping out, but that it really is about dead even. T.Y. Hilton against Jeffrey Okudah for Detroit. And then you got on Detroit side, Kenny Galladay and Marvin Jones Jr. They're going against Xavier Rhodes and Rock Ya-Sin. Xavier Rhodes is a good cornerback. He's a very decent cornerback. He was a lot better back in the day when he played for the Vikings, but he still is a very solid cornerback. The reason why the matchup is good, though, is because Kenny Galladay is a very big deep threat. Xavier Rhodes is good at man and zone, but more of the intermediate to shorter routes. He likes the jump routes. He's a very smart player, but Kenny Galladay is a little bit more agile and quicker and faster than Xavier Rhodes is, so he might get caught deep on a couple of plays. So, and then Marvin Jones Jr. He's a very, very capable wide receiver. He's going against one of the lesser down the line cornerbacks for Indianapolis, so that's why he's on the list. And then, of course, Jarvis Landry against the Raiders, Lamarcus Joyner. With OBJ out, Jarvis Landry is somebody that Baker, even before OBJ got there, is somebody that Baker really does like to play with. And with their tight end, Austin Hooper, being on the injury report, that makes that matchup even better, in my opinion. So. Just because of the volume of targets. So on to the tight ends. Obviously, Travis Kelce, like every week, he's going to be in the top 5 of the matchups this week, going against Neville Hewitt for the Jets. Mike Gesicki for Miami, going against the Rams, Kenny Young. For Detroit, T.J. Hawkinson against Indianapolis is Anthony Walker. For Tampa Bay, I have Gronk. I know I say Gronk every week and he underperforms, but I'm going to keep saying it until until he makes it right. Gronk against the Giants, Blake Martinez. Blake is a very athletic linebacker if you saw him play in Green Bay, but Gronk just still is. He's big, he's quick, he's just a monster. And then finally, Jonnu Smith against Cincinnati's Von Bell, or whoever they decide to put on him. After he beats Von Bell so many times, they take him out of the game. Jonnu Smith is just a really dynamic tight end. So those are my top matchups for the wide receivers and the tight ends. Now we'll go over the top 10 quarterbacks, top 15 wide receivers, top 15 running backs, and then top 10 tight ends as far as projection and points-wise. And again, this is not in any particular order. It's just who I have written down and then their point total. So for quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes. I got him at 23. Russell Wilson, I got him at 21. Aaron Rodgers at 19. Lamar Jackson, I got him at 19 as well. Josh Allen, I got him at 20. Tom Brady at 21. Ryan Tannehill, I got him at 19. Carson Wentz at 18. Justin Herbert at 20. And then Joe Burrow at 18. So those are the top 10 quarterbacks this week. Wide receivers, top 15. So Devontae Adams at 18 in PPR, and then 14 in standard. Tyler Lockett is going to be 16 in PPR. With the game that he had last week, that's going to be hard to call in standard. I'm going to say 13. I know he's got a lot of catches and a lot of targets, but as far as the ratio that I'm putting it at this week, with like adding the touchdowns into it, granted this number could be way higher, but I'll have to say 13 in standard as just like a regular game or something. Keenan Allen, I got him at 16 at 16 as well, and then for standard I have him at 13. DK, I got him at 13, and then 11 in standard. Tyreek Hill, I got him at 17 points in PPR, and then 15 in standard. I'm sorry, not Calvin Ridley. Here he played. Kenny Galladay, got him at 16 points, and then 13 in standard. Robbie Anderson, 14. Sorry, Robbie already played. Allen Robinson, there we go. Back on track. Allen Robinson for the Bears, I got him at 14 in PPR, and then 11 in standard. Adam Thielen, I got him at 15 in PPR, and then 12 in standard. AJ Brown, 14 PPR, 11 in standard. Stephon Diggs, got him at 14 in PPR, and then 12 in standard. Cooper Kupp, who was on the matchup list, got him at 16 in PPR, 13 in standard. Justin Jefferson, he is a hit or miss player, so it's big plays or nothing. So I got him at 12 in PPR and like 10 or 11 in standard. It's not that much of a drop off because he's lower volume, higher big play guy. Mike Evans, same way. I got him at 14 in PPR, 12 in standard. Tyler Boyd, I have him at 13 in PPR and 11 in standard. And rounding it off with Travis Fulgham, I got him at 14 in PPR, 12 in standard. So and then to our running backs, Alvin Kamara, got him at 22 points in PPR and 19 in standard. Derrick Henry, I got him at 20 in PPR, 19 in standard. He's not a very high catch volume back. Kareem Hunt, got him at 18 points in PPR, 15 in standard. Dalvin Cook, if he does play, he deals with hamstring injuries a lot, and you'd never notice it just from watching him for the majority of his career, or ever since college, all the way up to pros. He does have hamstring injuries. He still performs. So I have him at 18 points in PPR, and then 14 in standard, just because he does catch passes. He is a big part of that passing offense. Josh Jacobs, got him at 18 points as well, and 15 in standard. Jamal Williams, since he's going to be starting for Aaron Jones, I got him at 17 points in PPR, 15 in standard. Jonathan Taylor, 15 points PPR, 13 standard. Ezekiel Elliott, have him at 16 just for the high volume in PPR, and then 14. Well, we'll say 14. 14 in standard. He does catch about 1 or 2 passes a game. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I have him at 16 points in PPR, and because he is being used more in the run than in the past where they kind of started him off at. So 16 points PPR. I got him at 13 in standard. Giovanni Bernard starting for Joe Mixon. I got him at 12 points in PPR. He is more of a pass catching back, even though he will be used in the run as well. But because he is predominantly the pass catcher, 12 points in PPR, and I do have him at 8 in standard. James Conner, 14 points PPR, and then 12 in standard. Boston Scott, got him at 14 points in PPR, 11 in standard. Myles Gaskin, 13 points PPR, 11 in standard as well. Ronald Jones, got him at 13 in PPR and 11 in standard. And then rounding it off is Darrell Henderson, got him at 13 points in PPR and then 11 in standard. So. And then finally the tight ends. So the top 10 tight ends, George Kittle, I got him at 18 points in PPR, 15 in standard. Travis Kelce, 16 points in PPR, 13 in standard. Darren Waller, 12 points PPR, 10 in standard. Mark Andrews, 12 points PPR, 10 in standard as well. Same with Gronk, got him at 12 and 10. Jonnu Smith, I got him at 10 points PPR and then 8 in standard. Hunter Henry, 12 points in PPR, 10 in standard. TJ Hawkinson, 11 points PPR, and then 8 in standard. Mike Gesicki, 10 points PPR, 8 in standard. And then Noah Fant, I got him at 12 points in PPR and 9 in standard. So, all right. So those are the top positions. We went over the injury report, the top 4 most fantasy relevant games that we think are going to happen, as well as the top 5 cornerback, wide receiver matchups, and tight end, linebacker, safety matchups. So we appreciate everyone stopping in, and hope you guys have a good game, have a good week this week, and we will see you tomorrow for Monday Night Football's preview and matchups. Also, if you tune into our wrestling show, we will be on later on this evening for This Week in Wrestling. We're going to go over, obviously, Raw, SmackDown, NXT, AEW, what happened. We're going to revisit Halloween Havoc, as well as preview the cards that are on the table right now for Survivor Series. And kind of where we hope or see it going after that, or during Survivor Series. So anyway, thank you guys for tuning in, and as always, come with us if you want to win. Peace.